Good day, Junior Techies. This is Mrs. De Malon, and today we are going to look at the basic calculations for salaries and wages. So when we earn a salary or a wage, there's certain deductions that we have to make, like you can see in the pictures here. We have to deduct the skills development, we have to deduct UIF. If you belong to a medical aid, that needs to be deducted. SARS, pay as you earn, needs to be deducted. Your pension fund needs to be deducted, and then eventually, after the deductions, that is what you physically get out in cash. So, activity number 2 says Mrs. Havana works for youth care and earns a salary of 17,300 Rand per month. In terms of her employment contract, youth care will contribute 2 Rand for every 1 Rand to her medical aid fund by Mrs. Havana. So if whatever Mrs. Havana decides the policy is, they will pay 2 Rand for every 1 Rand that Mrs. Havana pays. Mrs. Havana decided on a medical aid policy from Terra Medical Aid Plan, and a premium for herself and her husband and 2 children is 1,200 Rand per month. So she also belongs to her Spesa trade union, which is a monthly fee of 35 Rand. Then Mrs. Havana contributes 7.5% of her monthly salary towards Pension Fund Walkaway Limited, and Youth Care contributes an additional 10% of her salary. Now, you must just understand the difference between a deduction and a contribution. Now, a deduction is something that you pay out of your own pocket, in terms of you pay it from your salary. So that is what will be minused off your 17,300 Rand. And that you will only receive your cash after deductions. But contributions is sort of an additional perk that the business gives to you, or your employer gives to you, as an additional benefit. So it's not a cash benefit. It doesn't pay out in cash to you, but it contributes towards your medical aid or towards your pension fund on your behalf. So it helps you either pay your medical aid, or it adds to your pension fund every month as an additional perk or salary benefit. So that's the difference between a deduction and a contribution. So let's look at the first question. They say, use the tax table below to calculate the SARS pay-as-you-earn tax deduction for Mrs. Havana. Now, usually you will not be asked to calculate taxes. You will always sort of be given the SARS pay-as-you-earn amount. However, it's fun to know how this works. So if we look at this tax, you will see that we have the tax scale on the left-hand side, and then the rate of tax that you need to pay. So you will see, if you put obviously between the 337,801 Rand, 467,500, you'll pay a lump sum of 70,532 Rand per year, plus an additional 31% of everything that you earn above 337,800 Rand. So if you earn, for instance, 400,000 Rand, you will start with the 70,532 Rand as a basis, and then you'll take your 400,000 minus the 337,800, get an amount, and then calculate 31% on that. And then you add it to the 70,532 Rand to get your total tax for the year. And that is how all of these ones work. So the more you earn, the more you pay. And yes, we all know, we all feel that tax isn't fair, but it's part of life, okay? So we all have to pay our taxes. So first thing is to know that this is a tax year. Therefore, the scale is per year or per annum. So if we need calculate this, we need to first get the yearly figure for salary. So they gave us the monthly figure, which is the 17,300 per month, which I need to times by 12, which is 207,600 Rand. So if I look at that, it falls into the bottom of the scale, right at the bottom. So Mrs. Havana will just pay a straightforward 18% on her income because she is part of the bottom of the scale. So she will pay a 37,368 Rand per year. Now, question number 2 says, how much tax will be taken off her salary each month? So you just take the yearly amount and divide it by 12. So 37,368 divided by 12. So a monthly deduction of 3,114 Rand. Let's move on. Question number 3. How much is the total monthly premium for Mrs. Havana's medical aid? So medical aid can be any one of the current companies in South Africa like Discovery, Momentum, Bonitas, MedShield, Gems, whatever your company prefers you to belong to, or if they give you a choice, you can choose which one you belong to. So they tell us that she belongs to her own medical aid and she pays for her and her 3 kids 1,200 Rand. So number 4, how much of the monthly premium will youth care contribute towards Mrs. Havana's medical aid? Now they say as a salary benefit, the employer contributes 2 Rand for every 1 Rand paid by the employee. So in other words, the total is, if the total is therefore 2 Rand plus 1 Rand, it's a total of 3 Rand, so it's 2 of 3. So when we take the 1,200 and we say divide by 3 times by 2, the medical payment by youth care will be 800 Rand of the 1,200 Rand that they will pay for Mrs. Havana's monthly medical aid. Then, how much of the monthly medical aid will Mrs. Havana contribute? So what is left over? So the 1,200 minus the 800 that the employer already pays. So Mrs. Havana will only have to pay 400 Rand towards her own medical aid. Okay. And why is it then beneficial for the company to contribute to the medical aid fund? So why would they do this? Why will they decide to pay 2/3 of her medical aid fund? Well, if you have employees that have a good medical aid and that goes to the doctor when they are sick, they recover faster, and therefore you have less downtime, more productive workers. So with medical care, the employees are more likely to receive better care and can therefore recover quickly and spend less time off work, increasing the productivity of the business. So technically, this is sort of a investment for the business in their own employees to get the most productive employees and get them less downtime off work, and that's to the benefit of the business. Okay, so number 7, how much of the monthly premium will youth care contribute towards Mrs. Havana's pension fund? So this question, they say that the employer contributes 10% of her monthly salary to the pension. So if her monthly salary is 17,300 Rand, 10% of that is 1,730 Rand. That youth care will pay towards Mrs. Havana's pension fund. Okay, number 8, what is the balance that Mrs. Havana will then contribute towards her medical aid? Pension fund. So Mrs. Havana will contribute 7.5% of her monthly salary. So we take the 17,300 times 7.5. So she will pay 1,297 Rand 50 cents towards her pension. So how much is the total monthly premium for Mrs. Havana's pension fund? And that will be your employer's contribution plus the employee's deduction is your total payment to the fund. So the employer contributes towards your employee's pension as well, yet again as an additional salary perk. It's not a cash amount that you get into your pocket, but it's paid to your pension fund, helping you save for your old age. So the 1,730 plus the 1,297 Rand 50. So she will save 3,227 Rand. 3,027 Rand 50 cents for her pension every month. Then What is Mrs. Havana's take-home or net salary at the end of the month? And you need to understand this. If we look at this little picture here, we have Mr. Gross and Mr. Net. So Mr. Gross is the round little man or round big man, and Mr. Net is the thin man. So there's a difference. The gross salary is the total cost to company that the company will have to pay to employ you. However, part of it comes to cash in your pocket, and part of it goes towards your medical aid and pension and taxes and whatever else. So the difference between your gross salary and your net salary is the deductions. So gross salary minus your deductions is equal to your net salary. Now there is what we call compulsory deductions and non-compulsory or voluntary deductions. Now, compulsory is obviously taxes, which includes your pay-as-you-earn and UIF, Unemployment Insurance Fund. And then your voluntary ones is like your pension fund and your medical aid and things like that. In Mrs. Havana's case, she has a total monthly salary. She has to pay her taxes, so SARS. She pays her medical aid. She pays pension. She pays union fees, and she also pays UIF. So we have to deduct all of those payments from her salary because the business has to pay these institutions on behalf of Mrs. Havana. So it's not Mrs. Havana who gets her total salary and then she pays her taxes and her medical aid and her pension and whatever from her personal account. The business. So they decided it's easier for one business to pay lump sums to other institutions on behalf of the employees than 100 employees paying little bits to the same company. So just to make sort of admin a bit better. So her monthly total salary is 17,300. Her tax is 3,114. Her medical aid contribution is 400. Her pension fund is 1,297.50. They tell us she pays union fees of 35 Rand. UIF is a compulsory deduction, but they didn't tell us how much it is. However, you should know or study that UIF is always 1% of the monthly salary. That's sort of the general rule as it stands in South Africa at the moment. So you have to then take minus off 173 Rand. How to get that? That is the 1% of 17,300 Rand. So she gets to take home 12,280 Rand 50 cents in cash, and that will be paid over into her account at the end of each month. Then question 11, 12, and 13 sort of relates to salaries as well. They say, all people earning a salary or wage are required to contribute to the Unemployment Insurance Fund, or UIF. What is the percentage of employees' gross salary must the employee and the employer each contribute to the fund? So, by law, the employee, Mrs. Havana, and the employer, Youth Care, must each contribute a percentage of the salary towards UIF. And by law, that is 1%. So the 1% must be contributed to the salaries and wages. Then question 12, what is the purpose of the Skills Development Act, and what percentage of their total salary and wage and salary bill must each business pay towards the funding of this fund? So skills development is to develop the skills of the South African workforce as well as those people who are unemployed. So every business is required to pay 1% of their wage and salary bill towards the funding of skills development. And this is to help people gain employment and to help the unemployment rate in South Africa. So this is a contribution. It's not deducted from your salary. It's the business who has to pay 1% of all salaries and wages towards the fund to contribute and help promote South Africans. Then 13, the main function of a trade union is to represent the employees at their place of employment and to maintain industrial peace at the workplace. List the main activities of a trade union. Now, this is not necessarily in detail anyway, but this is a bit of general knowledge that they always bring in something about trade unions. So make sure that you study this off by heart. Okay, so you help in effective communication between the workers and the management, highlight unfair labor practices and set procedures to eliminate such practices, seek responsible increase or reasonable increase in their salaries and wages from time to time, represent individual workers when there is a dispute, okay, with the employer or management, and this is after they couldn't manage to resolve the dispute on their own. Organize courses for their members on a wide range of matters. In other words, that will come back to the skills development. So teachers, for instance, have to do what they call skills development. So we do different workshops throughout the year on how to improve our teaching, or how to improve on our discipline, or how we can think of a different way of teaching accounting or maths or whatever it might be. Or even, how do we manage interpersonal relationships? What is the newest sort of development in teenage behavior, and what do we need to look out for? So things like that, so that we constantly learning and keeping up to date with what is happening in our situation. And that is the same for every sector in the economy. And then lastly, seek healthy and safe working environment for the union members. So that is basics, and you can study that off by heart and just have it. It's normally about a 3 or 4 mark question. Okay, then this is the end of this activity, and in the next slide we are going to look at, okay, how do we calculate all of this, and we record this in the Salaries and Wages Journal. So activity 3 is Salaries and Wages Journals. Thank you and goodbye from Mrs. de Mailon.